So it's late December, what, the 28th? Uh, it's a rainy morning. Everything is fine. The topic that we're going to talk about today is nurturing. Now, nurturing actually has a twin or an opposite, and that is critical. But in fact, Eric Burns talks about nurturing coming from the parent ego state. Now, what we mean by that is that when a new mom gives birth to a baby, normally there's a process that is called bonding, when the most important thing to her is her new baby, her new child. And she holds it and caresses it and feeds it and whatnot like that. But that nurturing, bonding, doesn't last. By the time the child is 4 or so years old, in fact, it generally happens when the child is 2, that a change is made in the mother's attitude from nurturing and taking care of the child into teaching the child or being critical of the child. Now, the reason that they would call it twos, in fact, the psychologist would even go so far as to call it the terrible twos, or the little tyrant. And that many children, the first word that they learn is no. In other words, the child himself begins to separate from mom, and mom begins then to separate from the child, and they become two separate entities, two egos, two selves. And this is really, really beautiful understanding that we have actually separated ourselves. Now, Byrne talks about the fact that every human has 3 ego states: parent, adult, and child. He gets that from Sigmund Freud, which had called it ego, superego, and id, but I think he was high on cocaine when he made those words up. So, Byrne talks about it in a more natural understanding. And in recent times, when they've gotten good magnetic resonant images and whatnot, they begin to see that the human brain is also made up in those 3 ways. With the child or the reptilian brain, that which feels is the original part of the brain that even snakes have. That's why they referred to it as the reptilian brain. And then later, as animals evolved, they evolved socialism. And what I mean by that, as socialism there, is that they evolved to the point that the parent, the mother, would take care of their children as they were being born and nurtured. So this is part of what they call the mammalian brain, and that's the rise of mammals, because the mammal baby is not capable of taking care of itself when it's born. It needs a mom, and this is also the start of nurturing. You can tell alligators, snakes, crocodiles, turtles, they don't take care of their young. They lay their eggs and they wander off. But birds are evolved enough to where they actually take care of their young. They take care of their children. Yes, Mikey, go right ahead.
Yeah, can you bring your mic a little bit closer to your mouth? The rain is drowning you out.
All right, how's that?
Yeah, that's much better. Thank you.
Okay, so as we further evolved, in fact, this is what makes humans human, is the fact that we have a frontal cortex right here. Now, almost all of the animals that have, let's say, the mammalian brain and the reptilian brain in combination, they do almost everything by instinct. They don't do a lot of learning. That in fact, turtles and alligators are almost doomed to um, repeat all of the problems that their parents had, that there's no real educational system. But when we get into the mammalian brain, that's when we have herding instincts and unity, socialism, society, and it has to do with caring for the young. And this is the source then of nurturing in an evolutionary sense. But then the human has developed this frontal cortex, which means now the human can actually see reality as it is rather than operating completely on instincts. Unfortunately, very few humans are taught to see clearly reality, that we're much more likely to live by instinct. Now, as you know, when children grow up, then in fact this happens in the animal world too, in the mammalian world, is that let us say brother eagles who come out of the same nest, as they're grown, they will compete with each other. And that cooperation is not done so much, that in fact that's what happens to humans. Can you imagine what human society would be like if all the humans cooperated together with each other completely? An example of that is that the Chinese are pretty good at building railroads, and yet they're the only ones that have that equipment. That none of that equipment is shipped to the United States to help them build railroads there, and they're not going to build any railroads because the railroads that already exist, they don't want new railroads. So humans don't cooperate with each other. We compete with each other. We're taught to be competitive. We're taught to be critical of each other and critical of our society. And the nurturing that we experienced when we were very, very young, we don't see anymore. And we long for it. We long for that unity. We long to belong together. And yet we're trained to remain separate. And so getting into that situation, the Buddha, by the way, knew of these things, and he talked about it in the language that he knew. He didn't know parent, adult, child. That's a new phenomenon. Eric Berne came up with that by observing. That in fact his original perspective was what he called transaction analysis. He analyzed transactions between people, and by analyzing the transactions, he began to see that there was a lot of cross transactions. And what cross transactions are is somebody will say something in one ego state, and the answer will come from another ego state. And that's exactly what we have when we're sitting alone. We will often have internally a cross transaction. What is that? That means that the parent says, oh, you ought to go on a diet. And the child inside is saying, no, I ought to get a new computer. They're too expensive, etc., like that. So we wind up in an internal conflict between these ego states. And that what we need to practice is going back to the original nurturing state, to where we take care of one another. And the way that we can learn to take care of one another is by learning to take care of ourselves correctly. And so one of the things that we can talk about then is to begin to nurture yourself instead of doing the standard that we've gotten used to. What we've been trained to do is to be critical of ourselves, to not like things about ourselves, wanting to improve. And so this actually gets in the way of Dhamma practice. That, oh, I want enlightenment. Oh, I want jhana. Oh, I want this and oh, I want that. And that this doesn't get us jhana. It gets us into a state of wanting things that we don't have, which is a clear definition of being dissatisfied. We're always in a state, or generally in a state, of dissatisfaction, and we need to practice being in a state of satisfaction. How can we practice being in a state of satisfaction? Well, the Eightfold Noble Path is a good key for that. The Buddha says to come out of our unwholesome thoughts, which in the realm that we're talking about now would be critical thoughts, and come into wholesome thoughts, which in the context that we're speaking now is to come into nurturing thoughts. Critical thoughts would be something like, this is a pile of crap. This don't work. I don't like this. Let's fix this. And then a nurturing or a wholesome thoughts would be, everything's okay. Everything is fine. Not a problem. We can handle that. And so you can see that we get caught in this duality of seeing something and then not liking it, wanting it to be better, wanting it to be different, basically wanting stuff that we don't have. And we've been trained that way through our society. Very rarely do we get any nurturing in school. Almost always, the teacher is either talking and nobody's listening, or he's asking questions which the students feel like that they're on the spot. And yet, there is another style of teaching, but I don't see it very often, that one of the places where you could see it would be, for instance, in a computer lab where the students are playing on the computers and the teacher is walking around just basically answering questions and letting the students play and do as they please. The same thing then would be true at the highest level, like for instance in a research project in graduate school, and they do a lot of this, by the way, in the engineering group in the engineering school in MIT, and that's why so much high-tech stuff comes out of MIT, is because the teacher will get a project, an idea for a project, and let the students tear into it all by themselves, while the master professor will sit back and nurture the students along the way. But that's not how normally our education system is set up. And this is why it don't work so well. An example of that would be math classes. Very few students in high school enjoy the math. Why? Because it's in that, here's the teacher showing it on the blackboard, and now there's a pop quiz. So, how can we change our education system to where we nurture the students through their math courses so that they actually enjoy it? I don't know. But that's not really our job. We don't really have to figure that out. What we really need to figure out is how each individual one of us can learn to nurture our own self. Now, when I say self here, I'm actually not talking about selfishness, but rather internally nurturing, internally coming out of critical thought and critical thinking, trying to fix stuff that's not broken. Why do we want to fix stuff that's not broken? Is because when we see it, we perceive it as being broken. And so if we start to change the way that we look, we can begin to see that everything is already okay. Everything is just fine. Not a problem in the world. But how many of us go around with that kind of thought process? Wow, this is nice. No, we go around with the attitude of what needs to be done. Back into critical thinking again. So, we actually need to practice having wholesome thoughts. We've developed one heck of a habit at being critical of ourselves and critical of each other. And we need to begin to practice being nurturing to ourselves, nurturing to each other. To do that bonding. This is in fact what the Buddha used the word of Sangha. The Sangha, especially noble Sangha, is where people nurture each other, cooperate with each other, and everything is beautiful. In fact, the Wats in Thailand are very interesting in the fact that the Wat tends to run all by itself because nobody's doing much of anything because they're just cooperating with each other. If somebody sees the path needs to be cleaned because of the leaves can hide animals, so we just sweep it up. Not an issue. And so, in general, there's no hierarchy, there's no police. Achan Po had a very interesting style. I watched him do that several times. I was hanging around him a lot, and the lay people would come around offering advice. Why don't you do this and why don't you do that? And his answer invariably was silence. He would listen to what they had to say. I finally got used to him answering me by not answering me at all. Once I wrote him a letter. I was complaining. I know I was complaining. I was as sweet as I could possibly be complaining. And later I asked him about the letter. Did you get that letter? And he said, yeah. And I says, what do you have to say? Nothing. And so you would ask, well, what happens if all the advice from all of the people go to Achan Po and he does nothing at all? He knows that he doesn't have to do anything because those who are complaining will eventually complain around until they find someone who will listen to their complaints and do something about it. But all the real nobles are not going to do much of anything at all because there's nothing to do except to pay attention. And so if we can develop the attitude that everything is already okay, then things will take care of themselves. Life is already okay, all by itself. But we have to practice that. We have to practice thinking that things are already okay because we are trained. I almost use the word excellently trained. Maybe a better word to use is too trained. We are trained to be critical. How can we practice then being nurturing? We can begin to look. The first thing on the list is to remember to look at what you're thinking. Rather than just letting those thoughts roll on and on and on, start paying attention to them, judging them in the sense of, is this thought worth having or not? Am I being critical right now? Am I just letting the mind wander? If I let it wander, it's more than likely going to be wandering right into unwholesome, because that's our habit. So we can start to remember to pay attention. That in fact, if you develop a formal sitting practice of meditation, this is what we need to actually practice formally, is to have nurturing thoughts, to have wholesome thoughts, to sit there and look at the thoughts that come up. Very few people, in fact, I would say that nobody, when they're developing a practice, is capable of stopping the mind, just like the captain of a big tanker is incapable of stopping that tanker. Once it's up and running at 5 or 6 knots, it's going to continue to go even if you turn the propellers around. It's going to slow down and eventually stop. But here we're not turning our propellers around, we're just rolling on. But what we can do is begin to steer the tanker of the mind out of the dangerous, unwholesome, into the wholesome. And this is what we can practice over and over and over again, is to take control of your own thoughts, to take control of your life with this one simple principle of, let's have good, wholesome, nurturing thoughts. One thought after another after another. And when you get fairly good at having one wholesome thought after another, one nurturing thought one after another, then it's quite logical to start putting some gaps between those nurturing thoughts without filling those gaps with critical thoughts. This is actually quite a simple practice. But look how complicated Buddhism has become. Almost all religions are really, really complicated, and the reason for that is it's a mixture of about 10% nurturing and about 90% critical. An example of critical in Buddhism is the precepts. You know, not killing, not taking things that don't belong to you, not engaging in sexual misconduct, not engaging in critical or actually unwholesome speech. Now, these are actually rules, and they teach the kids these rules. There is not that much different from the precepts and, let us say, the 10 Commandments. There's really not that much difference between the precepts, the 10 Commandments, and Sharia law, except look how downhill they go. The more rules you have, the more critical we get. But in the noble sense, if you don't want anything, if you're content and happy already, you're very unlikely to kill somebody to get it. You're very unlikely to beat the tar out of somebody when you're happy and content. You're very unlikely to steal, to lie, to cheat, to get drunk, to look for drugs to solve your problems when you don't have any problems. And so if we can practice nurturing and nurture ourselves and coming into the general attitude of everything is fine, not a problem in the world, then we do not need that critical aspect like precepts. We don't need them. We can see that they're there, but let's work on, if we're going to work, let's not even call it work. Let's play with being happy. Let's play with being satisfied. Let's practice being okay until we actually develop the habit of being satisfied, happy, and okay. And we can practice it on ourselves, and then we can go out and practice with other people. So when they go yak, 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 they get a great big smile from us. Just like Achan Po. He'd smile at people, but he wouldn't do anything anybody asked him to do. So, does anybody have any questions about this? Mikey, do you have any more for us to talk about?
I heard you mentioning Eric Byrne. Whenever he's talking about the games that people play, are these all critical games?
Yes. But in fact, the way to start talking about it is that after he and another colleague published I'm Okay, You're Okay, which is a really big, thick book that goes into life scripts and all of this stuff in detail, he then wrote a short book called Games People Play. Now, some modern uh, musical band actually came up with a song, became #1 on the charts. How many of you have ever heard of the song Games People Play Now? Every night and every day now. You heard that song? Is that two 1970s for you? Come on, guys. That was only, what, 50 years ago. Nobody's here from the 1970s, huh? I got to stop talking about what happened in the 1950s. That's too far back. So anyway, in this book, Games People Play, the publishers who already had published him and had a bestseller, they didn't want to publish Games People Play. I'm Okay, You're Okay. They got published, became a #1 bestseller. He wrote Games People Play, and this says, no, we're not going to publish it. Does anybody know why that would happen? It happened because in the book Games People Play, there are no positive games. They're all cross-transactional games. Some of the names of those games, like, in fact, the name of the game pretty well describes the game for you. One of them would be, let's you and him fight. In other words, you go to a friend and you tell him what's wrong with this third guy over there, get him so worked up that your friend goes and fights with that guy so you don't have to. Another one would be, Let's pull a fast one on Joey. Let's pull a prank. Another one, in fact, he had several games around alcohol. One of them was Drunk and Proud. That's the games that people play in bars. I mean, how many of you have ever heard of the concept of a bar fight? Now we have road rage, but in a way you could say that people have become addicted to all kinds of things. But in Eric Burns' time in the 1960s and 70s, most fights were associated with alcohol. There's also another game associated with alcohol, and the name of that game is Lush. Crying in one's beer. Oh, poor me, let's have an alcoholic pity party. So, the games that he had were actually transactional, where they always wound up in bad feelings, and they almost always had the association of cross transactions, in the sense that the game got started in one ego state and wound up going into another ego state, normally from parent to child, with very little adult in the room between your ears. And so we could say then that what we need to do is to come out of that critical thinking process in our parent ego state and see things clearly the way they really are, which means now we're operating not out of our instincts, not out of our perceptions, but actually seeing reality the way that it actually is. Now, every one of you can sit there where you are and turn this camera off and start thinking about all kinds of stuff that needs to be fixed, needs to be done, got to go to the bank, got to fix this, got to tell this guy off, etc., like that. And the reality is there you are in your room with no lions, no tigers, no mafia, no attack animals. The only animal that's attacking is you, and the only animal that's getting attacked is you. We're attacking ourselves when we're sitting in private. And what we can do instead is intentionally start nurturing ourselves. Oh, you're a good baby. Oh, wow, I'll take care of everything. You don't have to do a thing. These are the kinds of things that we could tell ourselves and start just enjoying our own peace and quiet. But almost always, because of the way that we're taught, our peace and quiet is actually an internal turmoil. We're playing games with ourselves. We're jacking ourselves around. And we can begin to stop doing that. Buddha talks about it in the word Silabhata Paramasa, which actually means, or is normally translated, is into rites, rules, and rituals, and our attachments to doing things the way that we were taught how to do them. And that this is actually where most of the criticism comes. We set standards for ourselves. How many have ever said that? Oh, I've got standards. What that means is that you've gone a line of, I have now an absolute fixed way of feeling bad. We draw lines, red lines sometimes, and then we cross our own lines, and then we feel bad. Why have any lines? We can just be natural. So, the games people play is transactional, but we have taken Eric Burns' system of transactions between people and put it into transactions within one's own mind, because that's where we really need to start. That's where we need to practice. That in fact, you could say that as long as TA therapists continue to operate in a transactional mode, people are not going to make any changes, because it's not time to change when you're in front of somebody. The time to change is when you're alone. Seclusion. The Buddha was actually quite big on seclusion. Get away from it all. Get away from the transactions that you have with other people and start having happy, wholesome, nurturing transactions with yourself, and start developing that habit. And when you get the habit of having happy, wholesome, internal transactions, now you can take that and start dealing with others and start having happy, wholesome transactions with other people. And the best place to have that is with other people who are practicing Dhamma. To do it with your noble Sangha of friends, as opposed to doing it with all the people that you normally deal with, like at work or at the office or in your bowling league, because those people are not practicing the Dhamma. They don't even know that they are often caught in mental cross transactions inside, and so they're playing cross transactions. They're playing games with each other. And so we can start to recognize when we're playing games with ourselves, when we're being critical of ourselves, and start to nurture, to practice nurturing, to practice telling ourselves everything is all right, everything is fine, not a problem in the world. Here, you just pooped your pants. Well, here, play with it. Write it on the wall. Have fun. This is the way that we can start to do it. Start being nurturing rather than critical, especially when we do things that our society would call screwing up. Enjoy screwing up. In fact, the art of screwing up is actually art. Breaking the rules, breaking the boundaries. And so if we would start to practice nurturing, we actually remove the boundaries and the limits, because in the normal critical world, breaking the rule, breaking the boundary, breaking the limits is a style of feeling bad, rather than happily breaking your own boundaries. Nurture yourself into breaking out of your shell. This is a way of thinking, is that everything is already okay. That's not a boundary. I'm all right with it. Don't have to do anything. Everything is okay already. So now, instead of it's time to work and get stuff done, that's critical, into wow, now it's playtime. Let's have fun. Here's an old example of that. I actually saw this happening. Rich grandma bought a Barbie doll, an expensive Barbie doll. They were expensive way back when. And gave it to the little girl, and the first thing the little girl does is tear the arms and the head off of the Barbie doll. And Granny goes berserk. I paid $60 for that, and here you are having fun with it. How dare you? And in fact, that's the thing to say about toys. Toys are meant to be broken. Houses of cards are meant to be destroyed. Sandcastles are intended to be stomped on, to have fun tearing it down. We have as much fun tearing it down as we have breaking or building it up. But if we start getting attached to, oh, it should be built up and should not be torn down, now we're in critical thinking again, and we're bound to go into a state of dissatisfaction. How dare you destroy my sandcastle? You say to the ocean. Here, let's build a wall around the sandcastle so the surf can't get to it. You think that's going to work, huh? Why not just let nature have its course? Let's not get attached to the sandcastles we build, even if they cost $3 million. Or nowadays, it'd be $30 million. And here comes the surf. And that high rise in Miami starts to teeter. Well, why can't we go have fun going someplace else and building something new? Why do we have to feel bad because we're attached to something that's already been done before? So this is what we mean then by nurturing. Nurturing means to continue to not be attached to outcomes. That's critical. Critical thinking is becoming attached to outcomes, seeing boundaries, seeing standards, seeing how things are supposed to be. Making rules. As a Dhamma person, as a Dhamma dude, can you actually stop making standards, stop making rules, and just enjoy the things the way they are? That takes practice. So, Santiago, you've been scratching your chin quite a lot at this. What do you have to say?
Yeah, I got a question, Dhammarato. How about this? How about when you want to cry or something like that? Maybe you're like in the middle of an argument. You don't need to win. You don't care about the argument, but you want to cry. So
Okay.
just cry.
Yeah. It's my party and I'll cry if I want to, cry if I want to, die if I want to.
I mean, yeah.
You would cry too if it happened to you. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with crying. We've
And then
got rules in
wholesome
our
it up.
society, thou shalt not cry.
Yeah.
It's okay to cry. But it's also okay to stop those tears, take a deep breath, and say, it's okay. It's the real problem is when people want something and they cry, and then they want it because of their crying to continue. They continue to want it to be different. The whole point about crying is get over it. All right, so let's change that to the point of, let us say the cat knocks the guitar off the shelf and the guitar crashes on the floor and the Dhamma dude says, ah! Then he stops. He doesn't start chasing the cat around the room. He doesn't go say, oh, poor guitar, let me check it out. He just, one time, and there it is. See that it was the guitar that failed, not you. You're not the guitar, are you? Yeah, that's the way of looking at it. I'm not that guitar. The guitar fell. but I'm not the guitar. I'm okay. Why should I have bad feelings? Why should I yell at the cat? Because the cat's not going to make any changes at all due to my yelling. That all of the yelling that we do to the cat is based upon our frustration, anxiety, anger, sense of loss. Basically, it's fear. And when we can say, ah, oh, and then I see that, then I can say, never mind. It's okay. I can't do anything about it. So why feel bad? Are my bad feelings going to fix the guitar? Are my bad feelings going to make the cat change? Santiago, that's a question for you. So when something that you would normally consider in society something bad happens, didn't happen to you, it just happened. And you were the one who called it bad. Then in fact the guitar may be better off because it's fallen down. We don't know. So can we nurture the cat? Can we nurture, in fact, ourselves? Oh, it's okay. I didn't need that guitar anyway. Let me make beautiful music within my own soul, within my own mind, within my own heart. That's where the real beautiful music comes from. Nurturing. Alex, do you have anything to say?
Nope, everything is very good. Thanks everybody. Thanks, Dhammarato.
All right, let's nurture yourself. How about Anna? Good to see you, Anna. Where are you now? In Mexico?
Yes, I'm back in Mexico, Dhammarato. I was missing these calls. I'm glad to be here in the Dhamma.
Yes, everything is fine. No problems. Nurture. Nurture
Yes,
yourself. How
yes.
about you, Edward? Do you have anything to say?
I'm grateful for all the good thoughts and the good time that we continue to have here, the teachings. Thanks for coming in through strong.
Well, think of it like this, that it's not the words that I say, it's that can you, in fact, take my joy and practice that? Can you practice nurturing? Now that you've heard about it, in fact, we've spent 45 minutes talking about it, where in fact all I needed to say is, yeah, nurturing's good. Good stuff. Go do. Michael, do you have anything to say? Come on,
Nothing to
Swift
say.
now.
Nothing to say. Thank you, Dhammarato. Everything's good. The grass grows. Everything's okay.
All right, you keep having that thought. Everything is all right. You're okay. I'm okay. Everything is okay. Not a problem in the world. This is the way to the practice of the Dhamma. So, Mikey, why don't you finish this off for us?
Yeah, thank you for this wonderful Dhamma talk on nurturing. Very much enjoyed it. If you're listening to us on YouTube or podcast, go ahead and check out opensanghafoundation.org. If you click in the menu, there's a community button, and from there you can find groups. And we have a Sangha group that people have been posting in, and you can post there too, like other people's comments, that sort of thing. Also, if you'd like to have a one-on-one Dhamma call with a seasoned practitioner or with Dhammarato, go ahead and join the one-on-one Dhamma calls Skype group. You can find it in the YouTube description of the videos. So yeah, thank you everyone for being here today. Great to
Yes,
see.
almost all of the links that we have are generally in the latest videos. We've got
Yes.
a long list in the description for the videos. In the description of the videos, we don't describe that video. That's too much work. We just leave the list of things about our sanghas, our discords, our website, and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we don't describe the videos, but we have been transcribing the videos. If you want to read any of this sort of content, you can go to Dhammarato.com, and we have quite a lot of transcriptions on there now.
Yes, and you can also get to all of those through our website on the resource page. We actually have quite a lot of audio. We've got a huge amount of audio. We've got audio of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa and Santikaro from the 1980s. We've got audio of Dhamma V2 from way back when. But in fact, there's even some audio there about retreat groups that go all the way back to the middle 2000s. So if you want to see some really, really old Dhammarato, I'm old now. If you want to see some really young Dhammarato, we don't have that, but we do have some middle-aged Dhammarato. So we've got a lot of audio files, we've got a lot of transcriptions, and we have a huge library. Go to the library page. It just is endless. We've got so much that we had to use Google Drive because our Google Drive is much bigger than the website itself. So we've got links to our Google Drive where we have huge libraries. And also, I strongly recommend do something like post. Send us a post. Send us something happy. Tell us about your practice. If you find something, Alexander, if you find some old Zen master, post it. If you want dialogue with people, we actually have a messaging system so that you can do one-on-one messaging. You can do group messaging. If you've got something longer, you can put it in a post. There's no end to the variety of things that you can do. So go have fun. So, anybody got any last words?
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Go
Thank you.
enjoy. It's your life. Go
Thank
enjoy your
you.
life.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.